On the other hand, if you are out here today and you consider yourself to be spiritual, but not Christian per se, because you don't believe in religion, then I'd like to talk to you as well. And the reason that I say that is a lot of people who would say that they're Christian, but they're only spiritual, don't understand that the Bible never condemns religion. The Bible never, ever condemns religion. In fact, the Bible actually gives us a definition of what pure and good religion is. How you doing, man?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm Todd. I'm not too bad. Huh? Hard to be bad on a day like this.
Very nice day out.
What's your name?
Tim.
Tim? So did you stop because you heard me?
Yeah, I was kind of curious what was going on.
Well, I'm a Christian missionary and evangelist, so they're kind of the same.
I'm a Lutheran.
I'm a Lutheran, so I would assume you would consider yourself Christian. Okay. Well, what brand of Lutheranism? ELCA, Missouri Synod, Wisconsin Synod?
I do not remember. It wasn't ever something that we brought up in the church.
Oh, okay.
Small town church culture.
All right.
That came up.
So by saying you're Lutheran, would Tim, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I've met a lot of people today, so I'm not doing real good with names.
Of course.
Would you have a reasonable amount of certainty that if something tragic were to happen to you, and I'm not asking that it does, but if you were to have something tragic happen to you today and you were called to account for your life, Tim, and God brings you into his presence and says, Tim, why should I allow you into heaven today? What would your response be?
Well, I really don't know. I don't pretend to know what God thinks.
Okay. I appreciate your honesty.
I think that's unfair to kind of put myself in that kind of perspective.
I wasn't trying to upset you.
No. I'm just speaking my mind here.
Okay.
I don't know. I like to think that I'm a good person, but at the same time, I don't want to go about bragging about it.
Right.
That's not a good thing to do.
No. About the time you brag about how good you are, somebody's going to come around and demonstrate how good you aren't.
So I really don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
Say, I assume you went through catechism and confirmation classes?
I sure did.
Okay. I assume, it's like I was raised Missouri Synod Lutheran, so I went through confirmation, and the entire time I was going through all this stuff, I was having to learn these things and learn about Luther, and I hated it all. Now I actually love Luther. So,
good point.
I really despised all that stuff. So it's funny, now I'm not Lutheran anymore. I'm lean more Reformed Presbyterian, and there's a Missouri Synod pastor in the town I live in, and he and I have great conversations. He goes, you're more Lutheran than most of the people in my church. So if you can remember, one of the things that sparked Luther's drive towards the Reformation was a very particular doctrine, was justification by faith alone.
There were 95 theses
right.
that he himself did not post.
His disciples, followers, students, yeah.
They basically tried to stick without his opinion, and he was excommunicated.
Yeah,
for a while.
Permanently. They put a death sentence out on him. So
they did. He made it.
He did survive. The prince actually saved his life and hit him, which got him in a lot of trouble with the Pope at the time. You guys together, or were you?
We came from the same class.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I enjoy listening to discussions on
It's
it.
interesting to have a two-sided conversation about religion for once.
That's the other thing. It's nice. I like when you're here because you're reasonable.
Oh, you've been around before?
I saw you last year.
Oh, cool.
There's also people over there that are.
It's one of the reasons why I don't go over there, is because I don't.
There are a lot of guys that like to just talk at people.
Yeah.
For no reason.
I have that tendency sometimes. I got to shift from preaching mode to conversational, so sometimes I have to work my way into it, so you'll have to forgive me if I talk over. And sometimes my brain gets to racing so fast and I want to ask a question, and it's like, because you'll say something that'll spark a thought, and I'll want to get the question out, and then I'll cut you off. So if I do that, go, hey dude, you cut me off. I will not be offended. So, but one of the things that really drove Luther was not the concept, but the reality that he discovered as he was studying was the doctrine of justification by faith alone, because he had been raised Roman Catholic, obviously, was studying to be a lawyer, left law school, ended up going into the priesthood, became an Augustinian monk. And it was reading the writings of Augustus, like the Confessions, The City of God, and a lot of the other things that Augustus wrote, where he started to realize that everything that he had been taught, which is where the 95 Theses came from, everything that he had been taught was really flying in the face of what we would refer to theologically as Orthodox Christianity, not Greek Orthodox or Eastern Orthodox or Russian Orthodox, but Orthodox as in
Typical practicing.
practice, normative, non-heretical practice. So you get heterodox versus orthodox. And so one of the things that had been missing from the church was justification by faith alone. And so the reason I asked that question, if you had, what level of confidence would you have if something tragic were to happen to you tonight? There again, don't want it to. What would God say about allowing you into heaven?
I would hope it'd be positive things.
Right.
But there are no guarantees.
So, and I would say you can have a guarantee, but it's not based on anything that you and I have done.
Well, it's a faith alone justification, but then that's down to me, and I have to decide, do I think that I'm good enough for that?
And so,
it's a whole other can of worms.
Yes, everybody's called to make a decision. I agree with that 100%. One of the things that Luther taught along with the justification by faith alone was that it's God who grants life. And I don't mean physical life, like, he determines who's born, which is true. If you believe in a sovereign God, God who's all-powerful and all-knowing, he's the one who grants life, and he's the one that takes life. And the scriptures say that in numerous ways. But there are other passages. Huh?
Those are the murky bits. That's the part where science and religion try not to get along too much.
Right?
There's a distinct difference between...
I don't like to stand above people when we're actually talking, so... So you had said something like, I'd like to think I'm a good person, but I don't want to brag about it. How would you define being good? What do you think being good is?
Well, being a good person ultimately boils down to your own standards of morals, and then that's also accompanied by a societal standard norm. So technically, by my definition, as I put it, a good person is somebody that follows the rules of their government in their land and attempts to do good, how they define good. So technically, that could be anybody that thinks, yeah, this is a good thing.
Okay.
That could be self-serving people, that could be selfless people. It all depends on the mental state too. But
if you have a mental illness of some sort or some sort of psychological trauma.
Sociopaths see things a little differently.
Trust me, I know that. My work environment, I deal with that kind of stuff a lot.
But what I'm trying to get at is, it's ultimately up to you to decide, but you're influenced by the people around you.
Okay. So can I sum up what you're saying? I'm trying, because I try to sum arguments up, not to debunk them. I try to sum them up. My brain doesn't always work the way everybody else's does. So what you're saying is that your goodness is based on a couple of things: an eternal sense of morality, internal, not eternal, an internal sense of morality that's also driven somewhat by an external drive of morality based on what societal mores are.
Yes.
Okay.
That does kind of encompass.
Okay. Does that encompass what you're saying?
Coming at it from a sociology standpoint.
Right. And it's even actually a philosophical argument that the philosophers have been having for a very, very long time. If you look at Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, that was really the driving root of what they were getting at was, what is a just man? What is a good man? And how do we know these things? So you had said something, so there could be a reality in which a person could be completely self-serving and still be a good person.
That's the point, that it's no longer in their hands to decide if they're going to a good place or not.
Okay.
That part is ultimately up to God to decide, but at the same time, you're born with those pre-existing conditions, circumstances sometimes you can't control. And again, it kind of goes back to your own sense of, did I do things correctly or not?
Right.
And then it's what society thinks too.
What are you studying?
I'm actually an earth science major.
Okay.
I used to be a teaching major for 3 years. I'd be a science teacher for high school level.
Yep.
And I've just been interested in a lot of.
Have you done any
psychology.
philosophy? Have you done any philosophy classes?
I've had exactly 2 religion classes.
Okay.
Freshman year and junior.
World religion classes.
World
Okay.
religion.
How you doing, man?
Thank you.
So this is this is going to sound really, and it's not meant to be as challenging as it's going to sound.
Oh, no.
So what if I said that basically the way that you're speaking, the Bible addresses that as everybody doing what's right in their own eyes. And the scriptures actually say that that's wrong.
Believe it.
Okay.
The Bible says a lot of things.
Well, okay. There again, I'm speaking from a very, and when I say convicted, I don't mean like convicted as in guilty. I mean a very strong conviction that the scriptures address the idea of everyone doing what's right in their own eyes, but that always leads to, as the scriptures say, it's kind of a broad, amorphous standard, or not standard, but description. It says that everyone has done what's right in their own eyes, and then their feet are swift to shed blood. And that's quoted in both, it's stated in the Old Testament and re-quoted in the New Testament a couple of different ways. And so the reason that I would say that it always, anytime that somebody's doing anything that's right in their own eyes, it's always going to end in them in some way, shape, or form having feet that are swift to shed blood, is that when our own convictions about what's good for me are allowed to become the driving force behind what we do, we're, like you said, it's almost always going to become self-serving. So that even the reality in which a person might do something that seems selfless, they're doing it for their own self-aggrandizement. So you could have somebody who just completely has no qualms about going out and slaughtering a household of people to get all their money, but he turns around and gives it to his mom to pay her mortgage or pay off her house. Really beautiful thing that he just did for his mom, but this family over here that just lost their lives is completely like wiped out. So self-aggrandizement over here, good act over here, but totally evil act over here.
If I could.
Yeah. What's your name, by the way?
David.
David. Nice to meet you.
I would say that as far as like a morality standpoint, like yes, it does focus like on individual, but with like that sort of story, I feel like you kind of left out some like the societal aspects of it, because like to me at least morality comes from human well-being as both like a species and as an individual. It's a mix of both. So for like with your example of like a person murdered his mom to pay his mortgage, that's not good for society, even though it was good for her.
So what was your name again?
David.
David? Okay. Like I said, I've talked to so many people today.
Totally fine.
So what you're referring to is what in there again, I'm not accusing.
No.
Atheistic philosophers, and one in particular actually wrote a really long book on it, a dissertation on this, and that's what you're referring to is what's called universally preferable behavior, UPB. And UPB is a reality. Okay, so I'm gonna argue that it's a reality, but what my argument would be is that David, right? Okay. Well, my argument would be, David, is that UPB can only be a reality because, and there again, I argue from what's referred to in Christianity as a presuppositional philosophy. You have classical apologetics, presuppositional apologetics, and you have evidentialism. I'm a presuppositionalist. So my conclusion that UPB can be a reality, even in a society that has no concept of the Christian God, the UPB can be a reality because God has, according to the scriptures, written his law on the hearts of every human being. And so we have a tendency to want order. So even though humanity tends towards chaos, look at things like, let's just go in recent past, you look at El Paso. We do have individual tendencies towards chaos, but as a whole, society is almost always moving towards organization. And the reason that organization is there is because of that innate, if you would, inward writing of a moral sense of behavior on the heart, on our internal being, our conscience. And so, I didn't mean to ignore you, man.
I was just chiming in, listening.
As we move together as a society, we are going to enact laws, enact codes, societal mores that are going to be good for us because we know innately that it's not good to murder. Now, there's a difference between murder and self-defense, and even in that we know. We know there's a difference. And so as we move societally, we may end up with a set of standards that do protect society, but that's not just strictly a societal, oh, well, society did this. It had to come from somewhere. It has to have an abstract source. Does that make...
I see where you're coming from.
Even if it's not the Christian God, it still has to have an abstract source.
I see where you're coming from.
I got a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, what philosopher were you referencing with the UPB?
The individual that I'm most aware of that has spoken about it the most as of late is a gentleman named Stéphane Molyneux. Yeah. I'm not a huge fan, but when he addresses the philosophy of atheism when it comes to morality, I believe his work on universally preferable behavior, try saying that about 5 times, universally preferable behavior, his work on it is actually phenomenal from an atheistic point of view. And he's actually socio-economic and politically rather conservative, which is just unheard of for atheists today. So there again, I don't really care for a lot of what he does. He has some interesting points, and I listen to a lot of different people. But I really am encouraged by what he says, and I wish I had the opportunity to call in and talk to him sometime, because I think he'd probably destroy me in a debate. But it'd be worth it it'd be worth it to take the philosophical spanking to learn. But what were you going to ask?
All right. So the question was actually kind of referring back to the scriptures. For the Bible itself, do you use that as a Christian? Like, do you use that as a moral stand ground? Do you use that literally? Do you interpret this literally? This is the law.
No,
my interpretation of it is, since it's been transcribed over so many different generations,
okay,
so many different iterations of it, and wording changes, phrases change, stories get added and taken away.
How the crazy people stand there?
A lot of people
stands there.
A lot of people end up saying this is the definitive word of God.
Yeah.
I believe it's based on the word of God.
Right.
But I don't think it's. I think it's a human interpretation of said God.
What is,
so how is it that you use?
It's just my contact card if you ever have any questions. I love challenges. I'm listening. Go ahead.
So how is it that you use the Bible as a practicing Christian?
Grab the other one also.
Okay. So here's what I would tell you. A couple of things that you're addressing there. The question that you ask, at the core, we deal with what's referred to as textual criticism. And so what textual criticism does is it takes a look at the earliest possible manuscripts that we can find. And we're finding more and more and more as time goes on. And so I'm not a Greek scholar or a Hebrew scholar, and I don't speak Aramaic, but most of us aren't experts in any particular field. Now somebody might be out of the 4 of you, one of you may be an expert in your field. I don't know, but most of the time what we're doing, no matter what our philosophical belief or our scientific belief, whatever, we're kind of relying on the expert work of other experts. And so I tend to rest, quite honestly, on the expert work of people who do know the original languages, and they are able to go back and look at the manuscripts and say, okay, yes, we've had the Bible translated into Latin, we've had the Bible translated into Latin Vulgate, and we've had it in Greek, Koine Greek, we've had it in Hebrew. Yeah, man, look me up. Yeah, look me up. I gave you my card. I'd love to, and I mean that. It's not. I'm not going to harass you. If you email me with a question or a challenge, I will gladly answer. Awesome. So it was nice to meet you, man.
It's nice to meet you.
Have a good one, Dave.
You as well, Dave.
I'm Todd, by the way.
Oh, Todd. Nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you. So then the next question is how does that work? Well, what they do is they compare the current translations with whatever language, whether it be in German or Spanish or whatever. They go back and they compare it to the original text. And they say, okay, if it's not meeting the original text, then we need to change it. Not, we're going to change it to meet our societal mores, but we're going to change it so it matches the original text.
There are instances that happens, though, isn't there?
Oh, I would say that as beautiful as it is, the King James is a really good example of sometimes intentional scribal changing, and there are people who would like hang me up to dry on that one, because there are people who believe only in the King James. Like, if you read anything else but the King James, you can't even be a Christian, like the people that were probably here last year. But there are places where there are errors. And so like the Bible that I preach from when I'm out in public is the English Standard Version. And this is actually, along with the New American Standard, is one of the most accurate based on the earliest possible manuscripts that we have. So there are passages that are in here that have asterisks by them. You remember the movie 61 with the asterisks about the home run championship, and and they put that asterisk next to it because the season was longer or something. Well, they put an asterisk by certain passages in here saying this was included in certain translations, but we can't find any texts.
So is that kind of what you're out here like doing right now? Are you trying to like say not everything in the Bible was that we're like reading today was how it was originally planned to be read?
That brings me to my second question. What brings you to campus today?
Yeah, that's what I'm
okay, so that actually, can I answer the second part of your last question to get to your second question? Are you all right with that?
As long as you get there.
Yeah, I'm going to get there. So the second part of it was, well, how do you know what to believe in, or how do you practice what you believe? Is it all law? Is it all meant to be literal? Is it all? Okay, so as we read the Bible, there are categories, right? When you read any literature, there are categories in literature, correct?
Yeah.
So like if you take in a literature class, you know there's poetry and there is prose, there is fiction and there is nonfiction, and within nonfiction there is autobiographical and there's biographical, and then there's statistical manuals and things like that. So the Bible is not a novel that's meant to be read from Genesis all the way to Revelation. Now you can, it's not going to hurt anything, but the Bible's not meant to be read like that, and it's not meant to be read as if you're reading just a story either. And so you can just open it up and interpret it however you want. So there are passages, or there are books of the Bible that are historical, and there are books of the Bible that are poetic. So like right in the middle of the Bible, you have Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Job, Song of Solomon, or some people call it the Song of Songs. Those are poetic books. Now there are true statements in there, but sometimes they're said in a way that's poetic. So when God refers to himself in different parts of the Bible as being a rock, is he really a rock? No, he's not a rock, but he's communicating. Or when he refers to us, when Jesus says to Jerusalem, when he's preaching to Jerusalem, "Oh Jerusalem, Jerusalem, oh how I would long to gather you under my wings like a mother hen gathers her chicks." Mm-hmm. Well, Jesus wasn't saying that he was a mother hen gathering his chicks. So you have to approach it, and that's called hermeneutics. You have to approach it with a particular understanding, and there are different approaches to hermeneutics. There's historical grammatical, there's redemptive historical, there's different ways. And so all of that, to answer this to the other question, is as I read the Bible and understand it through history, through didactic, which is teaching, through the didactic methods that are there, both in the poetic books and the historical books and the theological books where we establish doctrine and theology, the scriptures tell us that a true believer is going to go out into the world and preach the gospel. Okay? And so, and that's what I'm doing. So to answer your question, I'm not out here to say, well, don't read the Bible because it's not true. What I'm saying is make sure as you read the Bible, you're reading it in light of understanding it the way it was meant to be understood.
I think I just joined at a really weird time, a bad time where I didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah.
But it sounded interesting, so I wanted to...
No, I appreciate that. And I don't know if that answers your question, but...
I asked the question almost solely out of the fact that I know a lot of people, especially politicians nowadays, like to quote parts of Bibles for their own agendas.
Left and right.
Yeah, that's awful. That's how you move people, is you take something super important to them that they may not fully understand.
Absolutely.
And then you twist it to meet your own ends.
I have friends and family that I care deeply about that are involved in law enforcement. I'm a vet. I served in the military, and one of the things that just absolutely gets my goat. Oh, I appreciate that. But one of the things that absolutely gets my goat is when people open up the New Testament and they read, "Blessed is the man who lays down his life for his friends," and then they point it to law enforcement and they point it to the military, and that's what Jesus was saying in the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5 when he said, "Blessed is the man who lays down his life for his friends." He's not talking about guys who go out and work in the or serve in the military or serve in law enforcement. He's literally talking about himself in that situation, and no greater love is this than the man who lays down his life for his friends. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about himself sacrificing himself on the cross to make atonement for the sins of those who would believe, who the scriptures refer to believing people as the friends of God. And so,
Okay.
and so that, I get what you mean,
See,
because
I didn't even know that until you just told me that.
That's the interesting part.
Yeah.
Is people they like to twist things around just because.
Right.
And then on top of that, I forgot where I was going.
I have a tendency to make that happen.
No, it's a good thing when you fully understand what you're diving into,
Right.
instead of only kind of half getting what it's about and then trying to explain it to somebody else, which is where a lot of this disconnect comes from.
Oh, absolutely.
About it. And then there are passages that are outdated, or that have been outdated for like standards for societal norms based on like we don't stone people anymore. That's not something
Right, yeah. What I would say is, so like when you look at especially Old Testament, Jesus never dismisses the Old Testament. So like in one part of the Gospels, he says, I didn't come to destroy the law, I came to fulfill it. And not one, and it says jot or tittle, and that's, these are just the most minute pieces of handwriting that the Greek alphabet had. They're so small that, like, for us, the dot on an I is small, right? Mm-hmm. The jot and tittle that Jesus was referring to in Greek and Hebrew is so small that it's like almost imperceptible. That's how fine the Greek writing is and the Hebrew writing is. And he was like, not one jot or tittle is going to pass away. And so what he was saying was, I came to fulfill, and what he meant by that was, I came to do what you couldn't do, because God has said, keep my law. And then he writes it on our hearts, and then everybody runs around breaking God's law all the time. I'm like, I don't know what your guys' sexual proclivities are, but I'm going to assume red-blooded American males probably heterosexual. Okay, you see a girl that's hot, your brain goes a certain place.
Exactly.
Even if you try not to, your brain goes a certain place.
Right.
Right? And so that's, in God's mind, you don't even have to act on that in the eyes of God to be guilty of adultery. And that's what Jesus was helping people understand.
Oh, okay.
So like you go to the Sermon on the Mount, when he gets to Matthew 5, 6, and 7, he says, you've heard it said of old, don't commit adultery. But I tell you, if you even think a lustful thought in your mind, you're already guilty of adultery. You've heard it said of the old, don't commit murder. And there again, that's another one that people, it says don't kill. I have people say that to me all the time. The Bible says thou shalt not kill. How can people be in the military? How can people be in law enforcement? Now they're guilty of killing. Well, that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says thou shalt not commit murder. And the Bible draws a difference between murder and killing. There's going to be a time and a place where, unfortunately, you may have to take a life in the defense of self or others.
Right.
There are going to be times where you're just murdering someone. But he says that you have heard it said, days of old, thou shalt not commit murder. But if you harbor hatred towards anybody, towards your brother, if you have an evil thought towards someone, you're already guilty in your heart of murder. And so that takes us back to earlier where, really, now, and I'm not talking about you, but now we're like, oh yeah, I'm a good person. No, I'm not.
I think I'm a good person is what it said.
No, I'm not talking, like I said, I'm not talking about you, but I run into that all the time. Well, I'm a good person. I've never murdered anybody. Oh, really? You ever go to church? Yeah. Have you heard the 10 Commandments? Yeah. You ever murdered anyone? Well, no. Okay, let me show you what Jesus said you did. And so that's what you're taught. I love the fact that you brought that up. People will use stuff all the time because it elicits an emotional response.
It's the same thing with the people who like to gather over there. They'll take these very specific things. They don't listen to other people's inputs on the logistics or whatever of it. And they focus really hard on one little thing.
Yeah.
Says, you're guilty of sin. That's it. You're all guilty of sin. You're going to hell. That's basically the whole conversation.
Yeah, I heard.
Missing out on a whole second half.
I heard last year, and like I have friends that are from here on campus that are part of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and
like there was one guy over there that said, "Do you sin?" I said, "Yeah, everybody does. We're human." They said, "You're going to hell. You're not a real Christian.
Right."
Sin.
And what I would tell you is that what they just taught you is what's referred to theologically and doctrinally as sinless perfectionism. That once you get saved, you now strive to attain sinlessness. And then once you've attained sinlessness, you can never sin again. And if you do, you've lost your salvation. And the scriptures say that in John, in the book of John, not the Gospel of John, in the book of John, it says, if you say that you have no sin, then you have deceived yourself and the truth is not in you, and you have made God a liar. That's a very precarious position for people to be in. Hi there. I'm great. How are you?
Good. I see you're doing your job.
Well, I'm doing my passion. How's that?
Good.
You have a great day. So that's a really bad position for them to be in, because they're making God a liar, because they're claiming that they don't sin, and now they're holding themselves up as a standard over you and him, her and him and her and anybody else that walks by, and saying, now I get to determine what is sin and what isn't, because if I get to determine what is sin and what isn't, then I can say that I'm without sin. And where I go with people like that all the time, and I wish my friends from Fellowship of Christian Athletes had been able to get a hold of me sooner. I would have made the 1.5-hour drive down here to interact with them.
Right.
I would have looked at them and said, okay, the greatest commandment is what? And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but Jesus said the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your might. And I sum it up like this by saying, every fiber of your being. Okay, that's the greatest commandment. And that's the first four of the 10 commandments in one. And the second is to love your neighbor like you love yourself, which is the last 6. Don't murder, don't steal, don't covet, don't commit adultery, don't obey your parents. And so you've got all these 6 and you got all these 4, and Jesus sums up the first 4 by love God with every fiber of your being. Now love your neighbor more than you love yourself. And I'm going to look at a person that says that, have you loved God perfectly today? Because what you just said proves you haven't, and now you're going to hell by your own standard.
And a lot of it, I don't know.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well,
I feel like that's why.
that makes sense there, but then there's people, again, with their own agendas that are twisting things. I think the story was that a lot of them wanted to elicit those emotional responses so they could get funding if they had like an assault on campus. Because they were really mean to some of the people that walked by.
Oh, I would. So here's what
why a lot of the body cam stuff shuts people down too.
Well, and I tell everybody the reason I wear a body cams too. 1, I get cops called on me all the time. I already had campus law enforcement out here.
Actually?
Yeah, today, and they're fine. They were great. They just said,
right.
please don't use the amp. So now I'm hoarse, which I get if it's interfering, and I don't want to interfere with any class. I really don't. I'm not here to interfere with any class. I'm not here to interfere with a life. I want to see people saved.
Right.
But my goal in the body cam is 1, I have civil rights as an American.
It's a self-defense thing too.
And 2, the second part of it is, 1, people will say all sorts of horrible things about you when there's no way to prove that you didn't say it. I've had people say, well, he threatened to rape me. I've never done that. I've got video to prove it. Right. And the third is I have a board of directors that oversees me. Every single video every single conversation I have, every single video that I have, my board of directors watches it, and I have had them come down on me really hard because they're like, you were an utter jerk to that person. You're like, you must have been having a bad day because you were rude. And I need that sometimes. Yeah. But when you're out here by yourself,
everyone needs that.
When you're out here by yourself, and a lot of times, this last Saturday I was in a little town and I had a guy got in my face, called the cops on me, told me I was causing a problem, and he got really, well, I shouldn't say he got in my face, it's an over exaggeration, but he was really angry at me for being out preaching the gospel, and then he told me he was a Christian, and then he called the cops on me. Huh. And so now I've got video to show either if the cops try to say you don't have the right to be here, or they say, well, this guy said you did this and we have to investigate it. Now I can say, show me who was mad, So I get what you're saying. What I would say about their motivations, and I'm not questioning you, but what I would say, not in defense of them, because part of what you said is right. Part of what they want is an angry response. And more than anything, I think you're right. To some degree, I think they want the assault, but I don't think it has anything to do with suing the campus, because I don't think they do that. I think what they would do is they would take the video of that where they've been assaulted, and they would put it out on every platform they can put it out on and say, see, we're being persecuted for the gospel. Yeah. And the reason I say that is I've seen it before. And like, I've been assaulted for the sake of the gospel. Having a conversation just like this, I mean, nothing, the guy didn't like cut me or stab me or anything, but I had a gal that was throwing ice cubes at me for like 5 minutes, just hitting me in the head with them because I was just talking to people. And then another gal at the same time came out, and I was holding my cross, and she came out and she kicked it and knocked it back into my head and scratched my head open and knocked my glasses on the ground. And then they called the cops on me.
See, I hate pulling this apart, but it's like you putting up with that is remarkable, first of all, but second of all, it's, if it was a different setting with a different group of people doing the assaulting, it would be a much bigger deal.
You mean if it was just just a random fight or something.
Well, that, or if it was like a different like religion that was speaking publicly about their beliefs. It's it would be.
You mean like so if some
so
like
people,
say if a Muslim was
the
out
person,
doing
the
their
person
thing?
that was throwing ice cubes at you, they're probably getting respect from other people.
Yeah.
But like if people are throwing ice cubes at, let's say someone wanted to preach
A Muslim or something.
right? It would be like people would call you racist and people like. I hate playing that card, but that's just kind of the way that.
No, I think you're right, and I think that one of the reasons
I just wish everyone would be able to respect everyone's opinion and.
that's what I tell people all the time. Right. I can have adamant disagreements with a Muslim or a Jewish person or a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness.
Right.
Any of them, I can have adamant disagreements with them. I can even have adamant disagreements on doctrine and theology with people who maybe are genuinely Christian, but it never needs to be hostile.
Right.
But you are particular. I think you're right in one sense that there is a particular level of hostility reserved for, especially for people who preach the gospel decently.
Right.
And when I say decently, there is really no other way to preach the gospel. These folks that you were talking about last year, they were here for a reason, and that was to get a reaction.
Right.
I don't relish that. They relish it. Somebody comes up and they're mad at me and they want to fight me. I'm not going to fight them, but I'm not looking forward to that. Like, I could die. And like somebody could get so angry they come up and stab me. Probably not here, but that's not what I'm looking forward to. I think some people look forward to that. They run to martyrdom. They run to persecution.
Anyway, thanks for the conversation.
Yeah.
I got to go work out.
Yeah.
Take it easy.
I probably need to do that too.
Yeah, me too, to talk to.
I hope I answered some of your.
You did.
Yeah. I hope I was decent to you.
No, it's perfectly fine. I don't know.
Read that book I gave you. I gave you my card.
I'll give it a skim.
Yeah, I know you're busy. I know you got classes and stuff, but I'd love for you to think about the question of goodness, and not how you compare to me, not how you compare to anybody around here, but the question of goodness and morality, and then ask yourself how you compare to Christ.
That's not a fair comparison.
Well, it is, because it answers a lot of questions for you. So check out that book and hit me up. I love challenges. I love it. So hit me up. I'd look forward
Do
to
my
it.
best to see what I can get.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a great day, man. Thanks for stopping and being civil.
No problem.